everybody. Just about every sports car manufacturer out there has, in a special corner of their vault, a little drawer in which they keep some letters. And these are letters that are brought out only on the most special of occasions, because these are letters that all of us know when they are attached to a car, they signify this is a machine of great importance. For Ferrari, those letters are GTO. For Porsche, they are RS. For Lamborghini, they are SV. And for BMW, they are C, S and L. These are letters so special, they have brought them out just 3 times in the company's history. First, in the early 1970s for the car that started the legend, the 3.0 CSL. aka the Batmobile, terror of the touring car circuit, and today a bona fide icon. And those letters then lay dormant for 3 decades before finally seeing the light of day once again strapped to the back of the E46 M3 CSL. A car that, on launch, many people didn't quite get, but over the years has become a cult classic. A car held now in such high regard that you would pay upwards of 4 times as much for one of those as you would the M3 on which it is based.
And then, because I know someone in the comments will point it out if I don't, in 2022 BMW also built this, the 3.0 CSL, a tribute to a car of the same name from 5 decades earlier. It was M Division's 50th birthday present to themselves, and it turns out 50 very lucky customers. Even though it's been a couple of years, I could not find out exactly how much people were expected to part with one of these, but the rumour is it was along the lines of €750,000. And so, for the purposes of today, I'm going to somewhat ignore it. But you could certainly see it as a warm-up act for the car we are featuring, the M4 CSL. So, with such illustrious lineage, can it be worthy of such a badge? Find out in today's episode.
Though those iconic letters, formerly for Coupe Sport Lightweight and now Competition Sport Lightweight, haven't made an appearance since that E46 until the launch of this, BMW have still been building even more hardcore versions of their cars. For the E92 generation, we had the mighty M3 GTS, complete with leery orange paintwork and brilliant 4.4 litre naturally aspirated V8. That was then followed by the next generation's borderline psychopathic M4 GTS, a car that just about any and every road tester said was brilliant, provided you were on a track. And in many ways, this car follows very much the same formula as laid down by the previous 2 GTS. So, what you have here is, at its heart, the current generation of BMW M4, a car controversial mostly for its looks, but actually, once you got to know it, a fine thing all round. In keeping with the theme of celebrating the past, this car has had a minor makeover, paying tribute to some of BMW's models of old. So the front grille has been revised, and though it's still not exactly a pretty car, it is certainly better looking in the flesh than in photos, and in many ways I think works a bit better than the regular M3 and M4. By default, the cars are available either in this Brooklyn grey, or you can go for the more traditional Alpine white or black sapphire metallic. That's it. The wheels are bespoke to the model, making sure the car stops as well as it goes. It also has standard fit carbon ceramic brakes. And I've got to give BMW credit for that, because a large number of manufacturers still won't put them on cars where they are clearly very much needed. Like its immediate predecessor, the car also debuts some fancy light technology. So up the front, you have yellow tinted BMW laser lights, and at the back, lasers too, though for a very different purpose. They sort of illuminate the rears in a way that apparently means whenever you see one of these from behind, you will instantly go, ah, there's an M4 CSL. marketing departments are getting out of hand these days, honestly. The rear boot now has a little lip akin to the old E46, and in the name of saving weight, both the bonnet and the boot lid themselves are also carbon fibre, joining the standard fit carbon fibre roof. And as a very nice little touch, there are two prominent sections of visible carbon on that bonnet, separated from the body colour by a red stripe, which unfortunately is a sticker, though still, I think, very, very nice indeed. And those contribute to an overall claimed weight saving of some 100 kilos versus the standard car. Now, it's still no flyweight, coming in at around 1,630 kilos, but still, that is an impressive loss. And it's achieved not just through the fitment of those carbon panels, but also the deletion of the rear seats. Now you've just got a very basic storage area, though you are told not to put anything too heavy in the back, lest it, I don't know, fall through the floor. Up front for the two remaining seats, you then have a choice of either fairly ordinary, nice leather heated ones, or, to me, the only option, these absolutely stunning carbon buckets. Not only do they look super aggressive, but they're actually quite comfortable to be in. They support you really well. I figure they might even be good over a long distance too, and they are awesome. Really, really nice chairs. As for the engine, well, BMW's press release does take a little bit of deciphering, because there's an awful lot of stuff about this being basically a motorsports engine anyway, and so therefore it had plenty in reserve and they didn't really need to do all this, that or the other. And that is code for we've turned up the boost a bit, but otherwise it's the same as you'd get in the regular engine, which is fine, because this 3-litre straight-six twin monoscroll turbocharged engine is an absolute peach. It is designated the S58 and is, as you might imagine, the motorsports variant of the B58, the same engine that you'd find in the Z4, the Toyota Supra, etc, etc. In the regular car, it makes 510 horsepower and 479 pounds-feet of torque. That's 650 newton meters. Here, it makes 550 horsepower, a gain of 40, and the exact same amount of torque, but now over a 450 RPM wider band. Peak boost is up from 1.7 to 2.1 bar. Atop that familiar engine, you will also then find a brand new strut brace, also from aluminium and nowhere near as nice looking as the old carbon fibre item, but it is considerably more rigid than that in the regular M4 and contributes to overall improvements in the car's chassis, as does a now more rigidly attached rear subframe. In the handling department, they have then gone through things with a fine-tooth comb, so you have revised axle kinematics, different springs and dampers, so the car now sits 8mm lower, although I have to say, driving around as I am now, with the suspension set in comfort mode, it's actually pretty good for something that looks this hardcore. The gearbox is then the same 8-speed ZF torque converter automatic as you get in the regular car, and I cannot tell you whether they've done anything to it, but honestly, I don't think they really needed to. Though sadly I've yet to experience the old E46 M3 CSL, I have spent quite a bit of time in the regular M3, and one of the most significant differences between that car and this is the level of customization. In that, you've got a sport button, and all it really does is ruin the throttle response. In here, you've got an M button, an M1 button, an M2 button. You've also then got configurations for the M1 and the M2, and you can change the characteristics of the engine, the transmission, the chassis, the steering, the brakes, the DSC, for which there are now 10 different settings for the traction control. The first 5 of which are apparently the same as you'd get in the regular M3, and the last 5 of which have been inspired by the touring car. I am leaving those well alone. Then you can turn off the start-stop functionality, and you can even activate their sound control system, which pipes a bit more noise into the cabin. And that, to be honest, is just as well, because from outside, despite the titanium exhaust at the back, also saving 4 kilos, it doesn't sound like all that much. Does it go well, though? Well, let's find out. I've certainly chosen the right day to drive a 550 horsepower rear-wheel drive animal. This, unlike the competition, is not available with BMW's four-wheel drive, and to be honest, that I think is perfectly sensible. That being said, even with rain now beginning to appear, grip is not an issue. Up front, you have gargantuan 275 wide, 35 section 19-inch rims, and at the back 285 wide, 30 section 20s. Slightly odd setup that, but the net result is this thing has grip for days. I've gone through a few bends carrying a bit of speed, and I can tell I'm not even troubling the thing. It does certainly feel like a big old bus, this though. Unlike the old car, you don't really feel like you're sat down below looking underneath the bonnet. That was always a little bit weird. You're still perched a little higher up, and that makes it a little easier to place. That suspension, tell you what, that is pretty decent. Very firm for sure, but very, very well controlled. Let's see how the turning is. Wow, that's pretty mega. This little section here can be a little slippy on occasion, so I'm taking it cautiously, but even so, that front end is absolutely welded to the ground. I've got to say, I don't think BMW get anywhere near enough praise for their traction. I am not using the M traction control mode. Instead, I'm using the old MDM, which is the halfway house M dynamic mode that they introduced with the old E92. It means that on the exit of a bend, you can put your foot down. Honestly, I don't think the traction even intervened there. Does a really good job, this. Very impressive. Though I wouldn't say it exactly feels ballistic, this. Quick, for sure. Rapid? Not so much. I do have to say that, potent though it may be, I do think this engine feels a lot laggier than its predecessor, the old S55. That thing was mighty, and so is this, but it only really starts getting going at about 4,000 RPM. I would say that's the traction control reining things in, but the lights aren't flashing, and trust me, they let you know when it is. And frustratingly, it's not exactly a high revving lump either, peaking at just over 7,000. So to keep it on the boil, you've got to have it in that sort of 3,000 RPM window between 4 and 7. When you do, it's mighty, but it does always just feel a touch distant in its response. The feel of the brakes though, excellent, no complaints whatsoever. It may be partly a function of the grip levels available today, but when you do get hard onto those brakes, you do start to feel the front struggling just a little, and the rear kind of bringing its haunches up and twisting around a little bit. First time it happens, it's terrifying, but soon after, you do learn to gel with it. Then, for the most part, at road speeds, you don't need to worry about it. It's only when I went to actually test them that you really start to do it, and there in the dry, it behaved a lot better. I do also have to say that for a car which allegedly has so much torque for so much of the rev range, and isn't massively heavy, it's no lightweight, but 1,600 kilos, I've driven plenty of sports cars that weigh the same if not more, it doesn't feel especially urgent in the middle of the range. Not in the way that I think the old one did. Maybe that's just a placebo effect. Maybe it's because it's a little better insulated, and yeah, you can hear it, but it's not quite as wild as the old one. Maybe it's the seating position. I don't know, but it just doesn't feel like it's got that firepower that it really should for the numbers that it's making. Fifth gear in particular, it struggles in the middle of the rev range, and it's got 8 ratios to choose from. It's not like it's especially long geared either. Weird. This car belongs to my old buddy James Dean, who's bought it to replace a number of different cars. I kind of lose track. And it currently sits alongside a 991.2 generation 911 GT3, which has the PDK gearbox. And though at a quick glance they're both the same, 500 plus horsepower, rear wheel drive, sporty cars, 6-cylinder engines, they're very, very different. I suppose maybe that is obvious given the fact that one of them is a hardcore version of a dedicated sports car, and the other is the hardcore version of the hardcore version of the sort of sporty coupe that's really based off an ordinary 4-door saloon. And let's be honest here, the M3 and M4 are legendary vehicles, and BMW are more than smart enough to know that these are cars they cannot afford to get wrong. Once once you've then stopped having fun, and you are like I am now, back in town, driving normally, you're impressed not by the things that the car is missing, but instead by all of the things that it still has. So there is still an element of ride comfort. You are constantly reminded that you are in something very, very sporty, but it certainly doesn't crash along the road. The gearbox in automatic mode does a very, very fine job of shuffling through the ratios on its own, as it should. You still have dual zone climate control. You still have a stereo, though not a particularly fancy one. You've still got your brilliant iDrive display up here, which is both a touch display or operated better, I think, by the classic rotary controller down here. Then in front of you, you've got a nice, big, clear and easy to read digital dash with the M4 CSL logo up at the top, although I do have to say, I don't really feel like this ever makes use of the space that it has. I'm sure like most other models in the lineup, you can customize it and do things, but still it doesn't appear to make the most of its real estate. In front of you, you've then got a nice big heads-up display, and that gives you all sorts of information, or if you're in the sportier modes, a little bit of information, but the information that you need. So right now I've got my gear, speed, and the rev counter. I like that a lot. I have been driving the car in its M1 mode, which is set with the engine in Sport Plus, the transmission in D2. I'm going to change that, put that in S3. That's its fastest setting. The chassis is in comfort, but you know what? For science, I'm going to put that in sport. The steering was in comfort, I put it in sport. The difference, honestly, not that big. Brakes were in comfort, I put them in sport. Again, they feel nice. The DSC I'm leaving in MDM, and then sound control I'm leaving on. So with the transmission in sport and the chassis in sport too, what difference does it make? Let's find out. So, on your classic British B road, I can tell you the chassis, just put it in comfort. When you do, and you get up to about the national speed limit, it does start to make some element of sense. But in sport mode, it's just jiggly. That I would reserve for the track, as I would also the track mode that the car has, which they call Sport Plus. The gearbox though, I don't know why you'd have that in any mode other than S3 when you want to have fun. It still won't give you that snap and kick in the back that some dual clutches do, but it's more than effective enough. It gives you lightning shift changes, both up and down, even when I'm just poodling along like I am now behind a van. It's decent, works very, very well. If there's any elements of this car that I do have an issue with, it's the steering. And not just the steering itself, but the steering wheel. It is festooned with buttons and these large but kinda nice carbon paddles, which I think have a rubber backing. They're quite lovely, nice in the hand. They've got a lot of tactility to them. But the wheel is covered in Alcantara, which I don't like first off, but also lots and lots of padding. I don't know what it is with BMW, but a few years ago, they clearly made the decision that what people really like in a steering wheel is lots and lots of squidge. And I think that's robbing you of a vital part of interaction with the car. And I could kind of understand it in something like a 320D or whatever, where the people buying it probably don't care about the business of driving. But in a CSL? No. This is just wrong. Even in sport mode then, the steering itself, it's very, very direct. The car is incredibly darty, but it just doesn't talk back to me. Very frustrating this. It's clearly massively capable, this thing, and I think can be pushed far, far harder than I am presently, but it's just not returning the confidence to me that I want. Gotta say though, that front end does feel absolutely nailed to the ground. There's a little left-right flick up here. Let's see just how well it is tied down, because I suspect the answer is very. Yes, the answer is very. That front end glued to the floor. That back end, a little more playful. Gives this car a very, very interesting character, because the press release very much wants you to believe that this is effectively a DTM car for the road. But to drive, it's a lot more playful than that. It's a rather joyous puppy dog type of thing, this. If I were to say it's like anything else out there, it's the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Now, strictly speaking, I should compare this with the hardcore Giulia Quadrifoglio GTA M, but as I haven't driven one of those, I can't. The last hot BMW that I drove was the previous generation M4 CS, which is in some ways this car's forebear. Not quite as hardcore as the GTS, but likely a much better car on the road. And how does this compare? Well, it's certainly quicker, I'm sure of that, but I don't think it's as involving. The turning circle's not great. Visibility is actually pretty good though. You've got your reversing camera too and sensors all round as well. But I'm just not vibing with this car quite as much. And it does seem like BMW have repeated one of the mistakes that they made with the old M4 CS. You see, that car was some 90-odd thousand pounds when the regular car could be had new for just over 60. By the time this car came around, the price of the regular one had gone up dramatically, so it was priced closer to the old CS than the old M4. But even so, this commanded a premium over a regular M4 competition of nearly 50 grand. Yeah. They wanted 130,000 quid for one of these. Only 1,000 of them were made, and 100 came to Britain. I expect delivered directly to all of the people that have been really annoyed at the fact they couldn't get themselves a GT3 without having to play some sort of silly game or pay massive overs. And I've no doubt those people are trying to convince anyone and everyone that this is just every bit as special as a GT3. It's not a GT3, but that's okay. It's an M4. I didn't expect it to be a GT3. It does also feel to me like one of these cars where you need an awful lot longer behind the wheel than I've got to really make your mind up about it. But there is some good news, because if you're looking at this and thinking, yeah, that looks like that could be interesting, I fancy something a bit like that. Well, like the old CS, they haven't really held their value at all. And today, you can pick up a car like this, if you're lucky, for between 80 and 90,000 pounds. Or to put it another way, less than the price of a new M3. Certainly the M3 Touring. And when you put it in that context, all of a sudden, the M4 CSL becomes a lot more alluring. This is a car I would be very keen to get to know. This, I think, is the perfect car for a nice blat with you and your best buddy down the Autobahn over to everybody's favourite German toll road and get you home in time for tea and lashings of Kölsch. When I first got behind the wheel, this thing felt a little bit daunting, a little bit intimidating, very big, broad car. But just half an hour in, I'm getting confidence in it and in the traction control. I'm putting my foot down in places where before I would have exercised some caution. And I am developing something of a rapport with it. Is it worthy of the badge then? Well, I'm not entirely sure. But I also happen to be of the opinion that the old CSL probably wasn't either. Especially when you look at what they did to create the 3.0 CSL, the original, the daddy. However, having not driven that car, I honestly couldn't say for certain either way. So if you happen to have one, and you think I need to drive one, please do drop me a line. My email address is in the description of every video. It's talk@jayemm.com. For now though, I'm going to take a little bit more time to try and get to know this car a little bit better, because I feel like today I've only just scratched the surface. And as a petrol head, that makes me very happy indeed. I like cars with layers. I like cars with character. And I do think this has that. So, as ever, I wish to say a big thank you to James for lending it to me, and to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.